everybody, it's Rob Seaver, Executive Director with LeadsCouncil. I'm bringing you this week's on-air edition podcast with somebody that, and I say this every time, I know that I say this is super exciting for me. And the reason it's super exciting is that LeadsCon is such a ubiquitous brand within the industry. Everybody knows LeadsCon. In fact, LeadsCouncil is often confused with LeadsCon. And so I spend a lot of time saying, no, I'm somebody else. But because we're bringing you Kerry Smith, who is Division President, I think that's his title. I'm going to get into this in a second, but I'm bringing you Kerry Smith from Access Intelligence. We're going to deep dive into LeadsCon. We're going to deep dive into some of the things that are going on this year, and we're going to deep dive into what Kerry does with Access Intelligence. And so that's why I'm telling you I'm super excited about this one, because I know that there are a ton of you out there that really want to hear from LeadsCon and those people who run the organization. So, Kerry Smith, you are Division President, which I think there's even more to that title with Access Intelligence. Welcome, and thank you for joining me today. Help me understand a little bit. What is Division President? Is that all the title? It's part of Access Intelligence. What is this all about?
Well, first of all, thanks, Rob, for inviting me. I'm glad you're so excited. I'll have to share with my wife that someone was actually excited to talk to me today. No, it's great to be with you on your podcast and to address a lot of the topics that you're going to be asking me about today. Just quick about me. I'm a media entrepreneur. I've launched and sold a couple of media companies that have comprised magazines, websites, conferences, and events. Most recently sold my company about 10 years ago to Access Intelligence, and I've been there since, running what I sold to them, as well as now a larger portfolio of businesses grouped around the media and marketing sector. So yes, my current title is President of the Media and Marketing Division of Access Intelligence, and that division, comprises, in addition to LeadsCon, businesses like LeadsCon in about 10 other sectors of media and marketing, everything from broadcast and cable television, public relations, advertising technology, live events, corporate events, and what am I forgetting? And e-commerce. So we have media properties that cover all of those sectors, and then those are grouped within the media and marketing division of Access Intelligence. So that's the group that I run, and that group is the largest of the divisions within Access Intelligence. And then the others that we have are, we have a division that is in the aerospace industry. We have a division that's in healthcare, and then we have another one that's in energy and engineering. So we have, events and businesses that cover the oil sector, the power generation sector, the satellite sector, defense. We have an office in Arlington, Virginia, with people with Pentagon clearance that are going in and talking about nuclear waste and nuclear deterrence and all that kind of stuff. But that all happens outside of my group. I'm just focused on media and marketing.
Now I feel like I shouldn't have asked all that. I almost feel too privileged now, like it's going to actually create some sort of security clearance problem for me. That's amazing. I mean, when I go to LeadsCon, which I've now, I think, 5+ years have been attending, and I go to this event, I think of it as its own little secluded, ecosystem. And I was aware that Access Intelligence was the owner of this product or this platform. I just had no idea how broad the platform was and how many areas that you cover. And so certainly exciting. But, even saying that, as we talked earlier in the week, we talked about the breakdown of the executive side of Access Intelligence. As wide as you guys are with everything that you just told me, it's a pretty tight-knit executive group as well. And help me understand, because I certainly, and I think we want to get into this a little bit later when we talk specifically about LeadsCon, I certainly know Heather O'Connell, who runs the LeadsCon show side of it. But then, we've got Dan Hanover, which is her boss, and I'd like to talk about him for a second. But then we've got you, but there's not a whole lot of layers to the top then after that, right?
That's correct. And I think your observation about, you knowing the LeadsCon and kind of not seeing beyond LeadsCon is part of our corporate strategy, which is, we either acquire, businesses or start, businesses that cover niche business segments, and let them, there's no reason to impose, there's no reason for people in the lead gen world to even know who Access Intelligence is. They're essentially providing back office, payroll, accounting, finance, all that kind of stuff. So it's really not, so we like to keep the visibility around the brands that are serving the communities. There are people in the PR industry that have no idea who AI is. They'll see our logo here and there, but their relationship is with PR news, right? The event marketer community, their relationship is with event marketer and the people that are responsible every day for putting out that, that content through event marketer, and the same with LeadsCon. And really, and so, as a, in addition to that, or support that, from a corporate standpoint, we're a very flat organization. I mean, we're a family-owned business, privately held by a family trust. Our top executive team is 4 people. It's Don Pazor, who you see walking around LeadsCon every year. He's our CEO. Heather Farley, who I report to, is our COO. Macy Fecto is our Chief People Officer, and Jim Ogle is our CFO. And that's it. And then I'm the division president, and then we have 3 SVPs that run those other groups, aerospace and healthcare and some of the others. And then it's really the individual groups themselves that are serving those communities. So there's no big headquarters office somewhere with people walking around in suits and ties and all of that. It's really just sort of the frontline people that are working, to create product for those communities. And then, centrally we have an event operations department, and we do centralize some of our back office services, but, sales, content, all that kind of stuff. Those people work directly for, LeadsCon or Ad Exchanger or Event Marketer or PR News or any of our brands. So we like to keep those relationships local to the community so that we can stay as close as we can to our constituents in those communities, and not have a lot of corporate stuff, kind of confusing anything or getting in the way.
I mean, I still find, even as you break it down, I find it amazing that all of these, spokes can come off of the hub of AI. And I think we even talked a little bit before this started, how PR News and Event Marketer, which if I understand, Event Marketer was the brand that you brought to the AI umbrella. Is that correct? And
correct.
Subsequently sold it. Yeah. So I know that we have been to several conferences or I've attended events where there have been another AI event going on at the same time. In fact, I think I saw you several times at one of those. And it's just amazing to see the scope of this brand. But also when I go to a LeadsCon, it's also been amazing to see how family-like it does feel. So you don't actually get that corporate feel to what could be put on this show when you attend. And in fact, you talked about Don, your CEO. I believe he's as approachable as, any attendee in the audience, and is interested in genuinely talking to the attendee and the exhibitor and wanting to know exactly how we feel and what our thoughts are about the show. And that's been pretty amazing to watch.
So, for those listening to this or viewing this who have no idea who Don is, not that you would, if you've been to enough LeadsCons, you've seen him, because he sits in the first or second row of every session that he's in. He's the first one there. He's sitting with people at lunch, and he'll always say, he goes like, man, if there's one event that makes me feel older and older every year, it's LeadsCon. He's like, I must be the oldest guy walking around that event. He's like, that industry is so young, and but he's there. He loves LeadsCon. And I think he loves LeadsCon and we can get into, kind of the DNA of LeadsCon and, our thoughts about it. But, I think it's a great, story to relate, is I think, what Don loves so much about LeadsCon is a couple things. One, the youth and exuberance that is everywhere at that event, right? I mean, it's such a busy event, that community. is so interactive. I mean, it's really funny. We have so many events that we do across our company, and each one of them has their own unique personality. But LeadsCon, I think, is one example where, and we've all seen it. I mean, in the lobby of the hotel, in the coffee shop at Mirage around the corner, at the pool, at the bars, at the rest. It's deal making. It's constant interaction. There's that frenzy of activity, which is invigorating and exciting. And you go to one of our other events that might be in the oil industry or the chemical industry, and it's guys in suits, and it's very staid and quiet and boring. And so LeadsCon's exciting, and there's so many entities coming in and out of the business every year that there's that palpable feel of discovery, people discovering each other, people discovering new companies to work with, and all of that is fun. I think the other aspect of LeadsCon that is also, I think, an example of why we were interested when Jay was looking to sell his business, why we were so interested in it is, I call it the hug factor. So we do a lot of M&A for events, and one of the things that I kind of coined the term to Don and the folks internally, and where he'll say, like, hey, we're checking out this event. What do you think? And I'm like, it had a pretty high hug factor. And the first time I said that to him, he's like, what do you mean by that? I said, I look at an event, and if there's a real, the best events are the ones, or the best businesses are the ones where there really is a sense of community, where people feel like they need to come together. Yes, to learn, and yes, to have an experience, but more kind of to reconnect and be together. And when you have a community, a true community, it's amazing what you can do with that community and how you can serve them, and how loyal they can be. And one way to kind of measure that is how many people you see hugging each other, because they hadn't seen each other since last year or the last event. And when you see people hugging each other, that's a community. If they're not, it doesn't mean it's a bad event, but certainly if an event has a hug factor, that's a plus for us. And LeadsCon definitely, has a high hug factor.
I definitely have a personal attachment to what you just said, because prior to my life at LeadsCon, I attended quite many trade shows, and people knew me as the person who would not hug, the person who would not shake hands. And part of that was that I just had this germaphobe type of feel to me, and I struggled when we were in big events. But I have to be honest with you, when I go to LeadsCons, I'm hugging, and so it's something you guys shot me with or something. I don't know.
Well, I mean, not to make light of what we're going through now, but I think we'll all look back on how fun it used to be to be able to hug each other at our events, right?
Doug, I mean, we're going to get into that a little bit later on, but I got to be honest with you. Yeah, that's certainly, it's certainly to me something that weighs heavily on me, because, and we'll get into this later on, but I did an event with Heather, one of our industry impact regional events in Orlando, and this was back in March. And I have to be honest with you. I mean, we knew something about COVID at that time. We knew coronavirus, at least at that point in time. And we knew that people were elbowing, right? And so one of the things that I think that we're all going to have to figure out, because even though we were elbowing at the beginning of the event, it's just that natural, you want to hug somebody goodbye, or you want to shake their hands after they've gotten off the stage and done such a great job. And so a lot of work ahead of us, and we'll deep dive into that. I want to back up just a little bit, because, we talked about you having the event marketer brand and how you came to your position inside of Access Intelligence, but you were there. And I think in our pre-interview, we were talking about this. You were there when Jay Weintraub came to the table with LeadsCon. And so you, out of all the people, have a backstory about the evolution of LeadsCon from those days. And I mean, some of these people actually were involved with it before Jay sold it to AI, obviously, the Joey Liners, the Mike Paris, people who have been out in that industry from year one. But I got to be honest with you. I mean, that back end was important to me to understand, because you were dealing with Jay, and it wasn't just a slam dunk of, hey, I've got a product, let's sell. And And I thought that story was interesting, but help me understand a little bit about the evolution of, LeadsCon 1.0, but then coming to Access Intelligence and how you guys saw it and the opportunity, and then eventually how it evolved into the show it is today.
Yeah, sure. Well, I think as I recall, Jay telling me the story that the LeadsCon originally kind of evolved out of him, Jay, going to the AdTech conference every year, and AdTech had mushroomed to such a size that it was covering all things ad technology, and that there was this core group of people involved in lead generation that felt like that there wasn't enough for them there, that they were getting lost in the mix. And like any smart entrepreneur, which Jay certainly is, he recognized an opportunity to maybe break out of the ad tech event, and create something just for people involved in lead generation. And that's how LeadsCon ultimately, was kind of conceived originally. And he built up a obviously very strong community. He came out of that industry, so he kind of knew the players and the dynamics, and figured out how to create an event. He wasn't necessarily an event person, but he figured it out. And he and Michelle Troop really kind of single-handedly, between the two of them and some contractors, really did everything for LeadsCon. I mean, his mom, I used to joke with him, his mom ran Reg, and when we finally took over the business, I'm like, can your mom stay? So she was great. She was great at the kind of the farewell handoff dinner we had in Vegas, and I was sitting next to her, and after I waited till she had a couple of glasses of wine, I'm like, hey, what would it take to get you to come and run Reg for us at the next LeadsCon? And she's like, not happening. But yeah, so he built a great business, obviously, and a great loyal following community, and he got to the stage where he was interested in deriving the value that he had created, which created out of nothing, which is an amazing thing to do. And so and this predates my involvement with LeadsCon, because I think around the time he was considering selling his business, I had just sold my business to Access Intelligence. So someone who mutually knew Jay and Don Pazur kind of put them together, and Don's great with entrepreneurs, because we're not private equity owned, we're not a public company, there's no gun to our head to go buy. But if we see opportunities that fit with our strategy, that are attractive for many reasons, not necessarily all financial, then we kind of have those discussions. So we're not out in any kind of rush to do deals. And so I think so Don helped kind of counsel Jay on how to sell your business, and what kinds of things, what companies, what an acquirer puts more value on, certain parts of the business than others, and kind of helped Jay think through some of the things he was doing with his business, so that he could potentially derive more value from a transaction. So that was kind of like just a friendly conversation relationship that played out over the course of many months, and maybe it could have even been a year of time. And so at the point where Jay felt like his business was in a position where he was ready to entertain serious discussions about a sale, they had a relationship in place, and that kind of resulted in Jay selling the business to Access Intelligence. And so, I was telling you the story the other day, before there was even talk of deal terms or all that kind of stuff, Don had said to Jay, hey, you should call Kerry. Kerry's an entrepreneur like you. Kerry did the same thing you did. He started something in his house and built it and built it to a point where he sold it. And have an entrepreneur to entrepreneur conversation, and just ask him anything you want. And so Jay reached out to me. It was like 8 years ago. And he's like, hey, Don suggested I give you a call. I'd love to pick your brain. So we spent, I don't know, probably an hour and a half on the phone. And Jay was asking about the company, and he was asking about how things run and who does what and all that kind of stuff. And so we kind of got towards the end of the conversation, and I when it was kind of wrapping up. And I said, Jay, there's a couple of things that you didn't ask that you really should, kind of think about. And I said, one of the things you're focused right now on kind of what your life is going to be, for your business after a transaction or after you exit the business. But, you need to be prepared to kind of think about the following things, like emotionally, these are the stages you're going to go through. First, you're going to be excited because you're going to realize the value of all your hard work, in a very tangible way, which is great. Secondly, it's not going to be yours anymore. So yes, you'll continue. Typically the way we work our acquisitions is, we make an acquisition and then there's an earn-out period, which is a transitionary period where the seller continues with the business for a period of time, incentivized to continue to grow it, and we work on the transition plan. And then when he or she is ready to exit the business, we hand it off in an orderly fashion. And that's the way it worked with Jay as well. But I said, look, you're going to go through these emotional stages and you just need to be prepared for it. And there's going to be certain things where you're going to say, thank God, because now I never have to worry about payroll and accounts receivable and all that stuff that, lots of entrepreneurs don't love doing with. And you get to focus on the community and your customers and, delivering a great experience for your community and all of that. You don't have to worry about all the headache stuff. And, I said, so that's the good part. The maybe not so good part emotionally is, you're going to have to work with other people. And there's other people that are going to be interested in parts of the business. And it's not a bad thing, but it's just when you're used to calling the shots for so long, having others like asking you questions and stuff, just, it's something that might take a little getting used to. And I said, but the positive side of that is this was my second business that I sold where I went with the business to the acquirer. And I said, the thing about AI that I love, and I'm still here 10 years later, like Jay's moved on and done amazing things. Like I'm still here. And the only reason that I'm still at AI is because the conversation that I had with Don when I was selling my business is he's like, look, think of all the stuff that you don't like to do and that slows you down from being a creative entrepreneurial thinker, and make the list. And that's what we'll do so that you can be freed up to develop new products for your market, to serve your communities, to do what you need to do what you do best, which is create and grow. And I said to Jay, I'm like, and I took a good 6-8 months to make sure that everyone I was going to be dealing with that I was able to meet and feel comfortable with before I signed my deal with AI. And I'm still here 10 years later because they've made good on that. And I run my division kind of the way I want to run it, with obviously certain, guide rails and all that kind of stuff. But I still feel like an entrepreneur within AI, right? And I shared that with Jay. I said, hey, genuinely, and here's the things that, yes, I have to have a financial call once a month and go over bills and payables and all that kind of stuff. I can live with that, So anyway, I made it really kind of real and authentic and honest with Jay, and I think he appreciated that. And so, long story short, he sells his business. He's got a 2-year earnout. When LeadsCon came into the company, it went into another individual's group. It didn't come into my group. So it wasn't even like I was trying to, paint a rosy picture because it was going to come into my group. It was going into someone else's group. So it didn't really matter to me what happened. But sort of after that happened, Jay and I, continued our kind of relationship for, the time that he was in AI, but in another person's group. And we would have lunches together and we would talk to each other. Every once in a while, he'd reach out if he was struggling with an issue or, whatever. And so anyway, we had and continue to have a positive relationship. So at a certain point, as we made some other acquisitions in the marketing sector, we did kind of an internal portfolio shuffle where we moved LeadsCon into my group. And that was probably about 6 months before Jay was scheduled to exit the business. And so I got to work with Jay and Michelle more directly, over that 6-month transition period. And then when they exited the business, and we hired Corey Smith to come in and run LeadsCon, and he was with us for a couple of years before he moved on to other opportunities. So that's kind of the story about how it all kind of flowed.
I have to be honest, I have to rewrite the way that I tell that story now, just because I have way too much insight now. I'm going to have to figure out the needle that I'm going to thread on that, because I thrived on telling people, hey, 10, 12 years ago, LeadsCon was started, Jay Weintraub sold it to Access Intelligence, and here it is today. Much more interesting the way that you give it out there. What do you think it was about LeadsCon or the lead gen ecosystem that was attractive to Access Intelligence? I mean, why did it make sense? What was it about it and subsequently, how has it grown into something that's still attractive to you guys?
Well, I think what was attractive, it was attractive for, in a number of different ways. First of all, it was a strong, just financially a strong business that was growing, right? And so, and Jay was able to, create such a strong, the fact that he was able to create such a strong business, really it was he and Michelle were the only really full-time employees. Mike Faree was there as a contract employee running the LeadsCouncil, which we can talk about the evolution of that as well. And the rest were kind of contractors. And so, we were sort of chomping at the bit to give Jay resources like, hey, how about a sales team? I mean, poor Michelle, she was like selling the booths, and she was up all night, like, making deals with people who wanted discounts on their attendance. Like, it's like, you guys are crazy. So, anyway, so we look for businesses that are just strong fundamentally and have really strong ties to their communities and deliver a really stellar, attendee and exhibitor sponsor experience from a quality standpoint. So there isn't any event in our company or any brand in our company that would be considered kind of like phoning it in. It's just not the way. It's not what excites a company that's made up of a bunch of entrepreneurs, essentially. So that's one thing, and so they did a great job from that standpoint. And then strategically, because we've been developing this large footprint in media and marketing, the whole lead gen performance marketing sector fits really nicely with some of our other sister brands. So again, people who know us just for LeadsCon might not know that we have a brand that's called Ad Exchanger that is all about programmatic advertising, that has 2 events that are of the same size as LeadsCon every year. And we had, Google and Salesforce are big sponsors of our events over there. So we have this ecosystem of channels within marketing where LeadsCon kind of sits amongst all those other channels. And so if you look across our media and marketing group, we have a combined audience of over 1.5 million executives in the media marketing space. And they represent all aspects of it. So these are subscribers to our magazines and our newsletters and attendees at our events, 1.5 million. And so, and because LeadsCon fits strategically within the media marketing space, it gives us the opportunity to apply those resources not only to LeadsCon, but to all of our other brands, just from a marketing standpoint. So the ability to kind of do a targeted query of our 1.5 million people in media marketing and say, hey, show me all the Fortune 1000 marketing executives that buy leads, that we can then use not only for lead gen with our own customers that we're doing programs with, but also to market our events. So, again, it allows us to leverage the resources to grow what we're acquiring. So we just saw an opportunity to take LeadsCon, put it in the middle of our media marketing footprint, apply resources to it to continue to grow and evolve it over time. And fortunately, we've been able to do that.
Yeah, it's much more complex than I think the average person, especially the average attendee to LeadsCon, actually understands. So the breakdown is amazing to me. I want to go to, you mentioned Corey Smith. I entered into the ecosystem of LeadsCon via Corey Smith, who at the time was the showrunner. Loved working with him, loved working for him, because that's actually how I got into the role of executive director. But I want to break down a little bit, because now, as we've talked about AI holistically and what that is as an entity, I want to dive down deeper a little bit into the LeadsCon brand itself. And so, obviously, I had mentioned Dan Hanover, who works with you on the team as well, and then Heather O'Connell, who just also works on the team, and then we've got a suite. But I mean, quite honestly, the LeadsCon brand within AI is pretty intimate, and the players are small but agile, and they deliver a whole lot of value and service between the lines of the show in March or whatever it is. And so, help me understand now. You know, like I said, Kerry Smith, he was one of the showrunners at the very beginning of this. And we just watched your video. I don't know that matters, but we could go back and try to do that.
I didn't touch anything.
Hey, look, it's the platform. Do you want to go back up and see? And I'll cut this part if we have to. But do you want to see if we can get your video back? You go up to the in the
here we go.
again. Yeah, there we go.
There we go. All right, I'm back with you.
That's right. So now that we're talking about the ecosystem of LeadsCon itself, and we're breaking that down and getting into the players, we've talked about AI holistically. You know, who are the players, and what kind of roles do you see that they play in the everyday life of LeadsCon that people may not know? Dan Hanover, Heather O'Connell, Andrew Katz, you know, Warren Pickett, you know, Robin Hoy. We've got all these people. So how do they make up a LeadsCon for the experience that people know?
Right. Well, you know, it's sort of going back to, you know, how we kind of started the conversation today, where, you know, we like people to just know us for the brands that are relevant to them, right? And that goes to our staff, right? So there's not a rotating, you know, staff of strangers that people see every year associated with LeadsCon. It's essentially the same players. So, you know, I think from an event operations standpoint, Robin Hoy, who's been with LeadsCon since the transition, she's the person that people see on site with the walkie-talkie. She is the field marshal on site at the event, making sure everything is, you know,
she tells me accountable on one or two occasions.
Yeah, she's like I do what Robin tells me at the event. She is in charge, for sure. So she's making sure everything is operating and you know, operating correctly on site at the events. Andrew Katz is our sales, so he's making sure that all the exhibitors and sponsors that are at our event are being taken care of and are having a good experience, and he does a great job. Heather O'Connell is the sort of business manager for the LeadsCon brand, so her responsibility is the P&L and just the overall business of LeadsCon. So she's working with you and working with others, working with me internally and Dan on strategies for, you know, growing attendance in some new markets, you know, like mining, you know, working with outside consultants and others to identify new sectors of buying categories that we can find, and then developing strategies for finding those people within those sectors. So, you know, a few years ago, we started branching into solar, you know, and as some of our sectors kind of heat up or cool down based on, you know, which sector the government decides they're going to go after this year, you know, we're constantly looking for, you know, other sectors who are buyers of leads, and then devising ways to go and find those individuals and bring them onto the file and engage them and, you know, bring them into the fold. So she's you know, she's busy with the event, but she's very busy behind the scenes in you know, working on the infrastructure that supports the LeadsCon brand and making sure that we're constantly reinvigorating it with new buyers and new sectors. And then reporting and so Andrew reports to Heather and Warren Pickett, who is in charge of our content. Warren's awesome. I mean, most of the people probably listening to this know who Warren is. Warren used to work, be in charge of content for ad tech. So he knows the space, he knows the players, he knows the dynamic. And so we were, you know, I think Warren was the first person we hired outside of Jay, you know, during the transition. I think even before Corey, we hired Corey. We brought Warren on board to head up our content for LeadsCon, because again, it fits with our strategy. We want the best people who have the best connections in the market to be, running our content for our events. And Warren is he's a professional. He's a great guy, and he has a great sense of what makes good content because he has an editorial background. So he understands, how to vet speakers and just how to make sure we get the best on stage at our event. So he's been terrific. He's been there since the transition from Jay, which is I think 5 or 6 years ago at this point.
He is pre-show. Kerry, he's pre-show what Robin is during the show as far as like just cracking the whip, man. I've been on that side of the fence to Warren, so I just know that he's just like, let's get this job done. And so I appreciate his tenacity. I will say that. Super, super organized. When I again, you say it's kind of a family atmosphere when you're on site if you know who we are. And I say to Warren, like, hey, put me in, coach. Tell me where you need me. And hey, I need you. He'll say, hey, I need you to moderate this track or introduce these speakers. And he'll hand me like a dossier, although that's probably a bad word these days, but a dossier of like, all right, you need to be there at 5 minutes before. Here's your list of things. And so very thorough, absolutely very thorough and organized. And so all those folks, and then all those folks are supported, from our back office event operations and logistics teams they're doing all the negotiations with the venues and the hotels and all that kind of stuff behind the scenes that and no one who attends, really sees or has a need to see. But, they're supported by a whole group of people. So the people you see on site are kind of the tip of the iceberg, and then below the waterline are everybody else that's making it all happen. And so that whole group reports up to Dan Hanover, who's the senior VP, who kind of runs, he runs LeadsCon, event marketer, PR news, and multi-channel merchant, which is our e-commerce group. So really, Heather's mostly the day-to-day on LeadsCon, and Dan, kind of oversees LeadsCon and a couple of other brands. It's a great group of people. I think that as much as people know the show, they know the people as well. And so that's why when a Kerry Smith goes away, it actually has some impact because you get to know these people on such a personal level that it's as much as the show itself. And so kudos to those people. So look, I want to get into LeadsCouncil, but I don't want to cut this short because I think a lot of people who are going to dial into this, especially in today's world, they're going to want to know about COVID and they're going to want to know about AI and LeadsCon. And obviously we know now that the show has been rescheduled to late September, early October. And, there's a world of questions about that. But in general, this could not have been expected by anyone. Even your biggest disaster plan or whatever probably didn't have in place the scope and scale of how this thing came down and the speed of which how it came down. And, there was a lot of story there. And I'd love for you to share a little bit of, how this thing evolved and subsequently just some of the backstory, because I think a lot of people want to know, I felt at points, especially before talking to you earlier this week, I felt, man, the one thing that we probably could have done better in this was communicate. But then I didn't understand the level of communication of where that would actually hit you positively and negatively, in this whole scheme of things. And you down to, this isn't just like it's easy to put out an email and just tell people we're trying, that's not as easy as what went on. So help break this down just as much as you want to share, and I'll let you go at it, but I know people want to hear it. And then subsequently, where are we today, and what can you tell us about that as well? Yeah, well, I won't spend too much, time like rehashing, sort of the state of mind that everybody was in two months ago, right? Where this was just, you had half the world saying, everybody's overreacting. It's nothing, to all of a sudden it's just cascading exponentially. And so we knew, kind of early on that we needed a backup plan, a plan B for LeadsCon. It was a March event. And, what was killing us is that it was shaping up to be the biggest LeadsCon in the history of the event, just from an attendee standpoint and from every standpoint. It was going to be awesome. And so that was kind of that was hanging in the background. But
what we had talked about earlier and what I had shared with the LeadsCon board, a couple months ago when we had our call, is that, we, in many cases, we were playing a game of chicken with the various cities and states where we were having these events. And the situation with LeadsCon is, and especially as time passed, yes, it was clear 3 weeks, 4 weeks out from LeadsCon that the viability of having a live event was diminishing by the day. And so we had started having some conversations with Paris about moving the event into the fall. And, their attitude was, no problem, we'll find you some dates, but we consider that a cancellation. Even if you're going to move it, it's a cancellation. And so you're going to owe us $650,000 cancellation fee because you need to make good on all the food and beverage guarantees, all the room nights you promised us, because we're not going to be able to resell that. So write us a check for $650, and then yes, we can talk about. We think we have the week of Thanksgiving open for you, and that's what we were kind of looking at. And so while we were kind of negotiating that, the challenge was if we had sent out a communication to our community saying we were canceling the event or moving the event, that we would be held to that even if the city shut down events. And that's kind of what happened. We waited and waited and waited. And I know it was very frustrating for our community and our customers there, but we finally sent out the notice that because they had given us some dates that we sent out the notice like, all right, we're going to move it. I think it was 3 days later that Las Vegas announced that they were shutting down events, where LeadsCon would have been in that window. And the Paris came back to us and said, well, yes, but technically you announced you were moving before Las Vegas was shut down. So you still owe us the cancellation fee. So anyway, we negotiated that and everything's fine now. And we all love each other again, kind of, but that's kind of what was kind of driving the communication or lack thereof at that time. And then we were seeing that with other events in other cities that we were dealing with also. It's literally like we were waiting them out because we knew the cities or the states were going to shut down gatherings of a certain size. And so we would just have to wait. And as soon as they announced, then all of a sudden the hotels would change their tune and say, all right, here are the dates we have for you in the fall. And so again, probably a little more inside baseball than anybody really cares about. But I know it was an issue in our community. We probably could have done a better job communicating, but we were just hesitant to do so just because of the tremendous financial exposure that, potentially we'd be putting ourselves, we were trying to avoid that like anybody else would try avoid having to write a $650,000 have again, 6 months later. So, but I think moving forward to your point about, what the fall might look like, actually just today I shared with my team some guidance that we're going to be providing our speakers, our exhibitors, and our attendees across all of our events. Fortunately, because our company does so many events, that several of our executives are on boards of different event industry associations. So as you can imagine, there's been a lot of activity among these associations to figure out, what are the standards for hygiene and safety that industry-wide we should be implementing across the board and not just kind of cowboying it one by one. And so there's now starting to be guidance coming out from these organizations as to what we should be doing as an industry, as an event industry, for our events in the future. And so there's a combination of industry initiatives and then what the hotels or the venues themselves are going to be doing. And so, without getting into tremendous detail, although we're going to share this with all of our customers soon, and we'll post it on our websites, is things like, the obvious things, hand sanitizing stations and masks and widening the aisles, and you'll probably see no buffet food service. We're looking at, in Vegas, right now, the casino, the measures that are in place within the hotels are the casino measures, which limit no more than 250 people per certain amount of square feet. So that's going to impact how we set our general session rooms. We're going to have spacing, and the width of the aisles in the exhibit halls, are going to be probably around 20 feet. So we're going to be widening those. So, and then what we're doing as a company, because we have so many events in Vegas, we're going to pre-position PPE in Vegas. So we're not going to rely on the hotel to provide that. We're going to have our own staged in cities where we're having events, so that it's there and it's for us, and we don't have to worry about the hotel running out. And so we'll be working with our hotel partners to combine what they're doing with what we're doing, and a lot of those conversations are happening now. Because some of the hotels are like, well, we're gonna cover people from a hotel reg up to a certain point, but once they're in the event section, then that's on you. So we're working through that right now. But things like the microphones for our podiums are going to be disinfected after every use. The hotels, and we'll be paying for sanitizing door handles and everything else around our, where we're having our events. So there's going to be a lot of activity, and we're going to communicate all those measures with our three main constituencies: our attendees, materials, our exhibitors and sponsors, through the communications are regular. So we're going to take all the precautions that, we'll add on from there.
I can certainly appreciate the complexity of what you're dealing with. I mean, it doesn't sound like those types of decisions get done in an hour-long meeting. I don't think they will. I don't know.
Let me know if you have any connections to PPE masks.
PPE mask. I may. I don't know. It just depends on what state decides to say, "Oh, that was BS." You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, right.
I think there'll be some surplus inventory soon.
But I think,
maybe Wisconsin.
Hey, I think, as far as LeadsCon goes, is if there's one city that's going to have its act together on this issue, it's going to be Vegas. So they will probably lead the pack in terms of, being very proactive with the measures that they're taking for obvious reasons. It's a huge event city, and it's a back cornerstone of their industry.
I mean, I just think that, if there's a message that I've heard from you also, and even others, is that, we take this thing one day at a time. We have to, measure the news of the day, whatever the instruction of the government or the city or whatever it is of the day, the hotel, the venue itself, whatever their rules of the day are. And so, I guess if there was any one thing that you could tell the prospective attendee or sponsor out there, what would it be? Just to be patient and flexible, or what would it be?
I think, look, it's clear. We had our LeadsCon Power Hour a couple days ago, where we had 300 people register, and there were it was a 2-hour event, and at any given moment there were between 90 and 100 people there for a solid 2 hours. And what we saw there is what we had hoped to see, which is a need to sell stuff and an interest in buying stuff, buying leads, right? So this industry has a tremendous need right now to do commerce, right? And so that is only going to get more so as time marches on. And so I think my message to the LeadsCon community is we are going to do everything we can to facilitate commerce now and leading up to the live LeadsCon, later this year. And that is going to include a hybrid, event strategy. So we'll have the live event, assuming, the world, assuming we're in a place where we can have the live event. We're planning to have the live event, but we'll have a digital component to that live event, and we'll have other things going on between now and then, because we want to provide as many options as possible for our sponsors and exhibitors to generate leads for their businesses and to do business. We don't want everybody to have to wait until September or October to be at the physical event. And then we'll use the live event, to bring people together in a live setting. And my hope is, there's a lot of things that can happen between now and then, but my hope is by then people will be assuming that, the world and the airlines and everybody else can convince the traveling public that it's safe to travel and be around each other, and that we're certainly going to take every step possible to ensure a safe environment on site at our events. That people are really going to have the desire to. They might not be hugging each other, but they certainly will want to see each other and be near be 6 feet from each other, right, and see each other. Because this industry, I mean, I see the same players that I see every year at this event, and I know how important it is for them to get together and be around each other. And I think that it's going to be more so this year. So my hope is that we're going to get through this, and we'll make it to the fall. We'll be able to deliver a great event, and we'll communicate as best we can.
I think the most important question, Kerry, will there be alcohol? I mean,
oh yeah,
I think that cures a lot of the ills.
Oh yeah, there will.
Look, we're running late here, which is okay with me, but I want to respect your time. But 2 questions that I have, and you can tackle them any way you'd like. One of them is Connect to Convert. I want to just briefly talk about that because that was a show that was obviously scheduled near the same time that now LeadsCon has been rescheduled for. We talked a little bit about the brand itself and why we broke that from the LeadsCon East or whatever it was considered. But what do you see? Give me a high-level overview of Connect to Convert, and where do you see it going? Obviously not for this year, but in 2021 and beyond.
Yeah. Without going into detailed history, at the time that we had acquired, which was like LeadsCon little brother, and as I understand it, I was thinking about the other day, if I remember the story correctly from Jay, the original concept between LeadsCon and New York had to do with a defensive play, right? He had the Vegas event in the spring, and he didn't want to have an opening in New York for create a competitive event. So he planted one, and he picked August because it was the hotels were cheap in August in New York, and it also gave him another cash flow event, kind of halfway through the year, which I get as an entrepreneur. You cash flow because you don't want to wait all year for your one event to generate cash. So those are kind of the reasons that went into it. There was honestly there was little duplicate. There was minimal duplication in the audience. We ran the analyses like consistently that there was 20% overlap in attendance between New York and Vegas, but yet the perception from the exhibitor side was that it's the same people, so I might as well just go to Vegas because that's the bigger event. So even though we had the data that said, look, we got much more agencies because it's in New York, agencies are much larger a part of the attendee base in New York than there are in Vegas. So it's a different audience. And finally, and New York at the time was getting more and more expensive, and the size that LeadsCon New York is like it's the worst size for an event in New York, because at a certain point you have 2 options: the Hilton and the Marriott, and after that it's Javits, and there's other options if you're smaller, and the Marriott and the Hilton know it, and so the pricing every year just got more and more onerous, and we kind of said to each other, God, this event is not growing, the costs are going up, it's a struggle to get the exhibitors to kind of think of it differently, and we just said, what, we should just blow the thing up, change the strategy, and that's kind of what we did. We said, look, and we, a lot of people are like, guys, really, 3rd week in August, like, so we said, look, let's just not iterate out of it. Let's just change it up completely. The reason behind the Connect to Convert strategy was, let's focus LeadsCon, the mothership Vegas, on lead acquisition and all things lead related. And let's broaden the scope of the other LeadsCon event to be more front end and back end, right? So acquisition, nurture, conversion. So Connect to Convert, the whole lead ecosystem, and broaden it. So that would theoretically allow us to bring in more people in content marketing, more people that are sort of beyond, not necessarily core lead gen people within on the buy side, but some others involved in marketing related to leads in terms of nurture and conversion and all that kind of stuff. That was the vision. Of course, like the first year, and we moved it to Boston, and we felt like, look, Boston gives us access to still agencies, but financial services, insurance, technology companies. And of course, the first year was a hotel strike. So we got to contend with that, which, a little bit. But, that is still, and this year, of course, it's canceled. But it's an event in transition, and it's going to take us probably a little bit more, a few more iterations to really footing with that event. But we'll continue to iterate it. But that's kind of the strategy, is to just kind of broaden it and create some differentiation between the two events.
So, I mean, just to summarize it, it's not dead. You guys are continuing to toy or tinker with the model so that we can get it right. There'll be a new venue, new location, new city in 2021, or are we still looking, or is that not decided yet?
That's a good. I can't remember. I know we had a multi-year deal with the West in there, and this may have been the third of the three-year deal. But we moved one of our other events into the Connect to Convert slot, so that might fulfill our commitment. So yeah, I couldn't tell you at the moment where we'll be in 2020.
Still a commitment to
Absolutely.
Connect to Convert. It's all right, cool. I'm going to finish up with just what's near and dear to me. I got into this whole LeadsCon ecosystem through Kerry Smith, who brought me on as a writer of weekly podcasts or weekly events. He wanted me to do some sort of writing, maybe blogs. I don't even know what it was at the time. He had me call Greg Gragg as hey, look, see what he needs you to write about. I called Greg Gragg. Greg Gragg said, hey, glad to see that we have an executive director now. And I was like, yeah, that's awesome. And so I hung up real quickly, called Corey, said 911. I'm now the executive director. And he's like, yeah, good job. Run with it. I worked through Access Intelligence early on because you guys owned it. You acquired it with the brand, obviously, from Jay Weintraub. Tell me this. I don't want to go a whole historical approach to LeadsCouncil, but why is it still important that you guys support us, that Access Intelligence backs everything that we do? You give us the stage, you give us the recognition, and you've been very much a supporter. And in fact, during this COVID thing, it was important for you to call the board to just at least communicate and ask what our opinion was, which I think went a long way, as it represented, your commitment to the industry and understanding what we do. So why is it still important to commit to and support somebody like the council?
Well, I mean, I think that especially in the last couple of years that, the lead industry has had to defend itself, on a number of fronts. In a way that it hasn't had to, prior to that. And so I think having a body, a formal body that can respond to inquiries or create, education and educate policymakers on, what best practices are and what good players do and what, good corporate citizens do and what is good behavior, I think is really important. For the industry, and what's good for the industry is what's good for LeadsCon. I mean, I think, again, I know we're probably running long here, but I think, when the LeadsCouncil came over with Jay's business, we were kind of scratching our heads because we're typically not in the association business, although it wasn't really an association per se, but kind of it was. And Mike Ferree was running it at the time, and it was more kind of a membership organization and, a gathering place, and you got certain perks and starting a few years ago when regulation started rearing its head, and all of a sudden, companies were being targeted and policymakers were swooping in and targeting companies in certain sectors, it became clear to us that the charter for LeadsCon was probably going to shift to be more, kind of government regulatory in nature, right? Because many of our board members were, personally, their companies were being attacked. And, it was at that time that we said, look, it probably doesn't make sense for us because we're not really built to manage an association. I mean, you remember we had hired a lobbying firm and we were kind of flowing the money through us to the lobbying firm. And we were kind of, in the middle of all of this. And at a certain point, I kind of said, guys, you don't need us to be between you and what you're trying to accomplish. So why don't we just figure out a way? Let's spin off LeadsCouncil and make it its own entity. And we'll support it, and we'll continue to provide a forum and a meeting place and all. Like we want to provide as much support as we can to the LeadsCouncil, because we feel like there's value in the organization for the industry, and that our involvement might just get in the way or slow it down. So that was kind of the impetus for spinning it off, really. And there was no, as you know, there was no compensation to us or anything along those lines. We just were happy that we were able to help it live on and do, much more direct work, to accomplish its mission. And so we will continue to support LeadsCouncil. We think it's an incredibly important organization, and that every industry needs a body that can speak for it, and LeadsCouncil is certainly that body for the lead gen industry.
Man, I need to hire you as our front man. We need to have somebody who can talk as passionately about it. So certainly appreciate that. Well, Kerry, look, we've certainly ran long, but I got to be honest, it's been 100% fascinating to me. Even in some cases, for the second time I'm hearing this, it's just something that is so connected to the DNA of what I do daily, especially in my role as LeadsCouncil Executive Director, but also just in general, the industry. I remember Joey Liner talking about LeadsCon early on, and he calls this event our Super Bowl of the industry. And I very much still believe that to be the case. And so it's such an integral part of the day-to-day operations that even though it is once a year, it very much is resonant every day of the year, 365 days. And I did participate the other day in the Power Hour. How often are those going to be held? Do you know? I know I'm catching you off guard on that, but.
Yeah, I think I don't know what we have scheduled. We're definitely going to do some more. The first one was a test to see if anybody would come and how it would go. So we were happy with it, and we've gotten some good feedback. So we'll definitely be doing some more of those.
I felt like, somebody walking in at a high school dance, not wondering, who I'm going to ask to dance. I was just like, I don't know how to act here. Yeah, but certainly I ended up getting like 4 calls out of that, like 4 scheduled calls. And so it was certainly productive as it relates to just networking and talking to people and just getting that energy back together. So I'm super excited about it. Kerry, thank you very much for your time. We've ran really long here. I appreciate you sticking with it and giving us the insight. I know you didn't have to do this, but people are really interested in what's going on. They're not sure about what the future, brings as it relates to this industry. And so just having a little bit of that communication, I think, goes a long way. So thank you. Is there anything else that you'd like to share before we sign off on this?
No, well, I just thank you, Rob, for all your continued support. And we enjoy our relationship with you personally and certainly with LeadsCouncil. So thanks for, it was fun to kind of go down memory lane, and remember some stories about Jay and, recount, how this all, came to pass. So I appreciate the opportunity and thanks. And I hope to see you in September in person.
We'll have a beer 6 feet apart. Okay.
You're on.
All right, man. Thank you very much.
All right.
We'll talk later.
Thanks, Rob.
Bye.
All right. Take care.